Everyone, my name is Missy Hicks, and I'm the co-founder of Wonders and Worries, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. Welcome to our latest Wonder Chat for Parents, titled Understanding Cancer Together, Engaging Activities for Children and Teenagers Throughout Your Cancer Journey. A few housekeeping items before we get started. If you're attending the live webinar, you'll be able to ask questions to our presenters in the Q&A feature. Also, if you'd like to communicate with each other during the presentation, you can use the chat feature to do so. I'll be monitoring both throughout the presentation, and we'll let our presenters know if you have any questions. If you're watching the recorded webinar, you're welcome to email questions to our helpline at helpline@wondersandworries.org.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Kim Fryer, and we have Katie Hart here, and Katie and I will be stepping you through this presentation. I'm our National Program Director at Wonders and Worries, and let's jump in. Oh, Katie, go ahead. Okay. So Wonders and Worries, in case you're new to us and this is the first Wonder Chat you've watched or first time you've interacted with us, we are a nonprofit that focuses on providing free professional support to children and teenagers throughout a parent's serious illness or injury so that they can reach their full potential. And today we're going to be focusing specifically on cancer, but just know that we do work with all types of illnesses and injuries. I wanted to highlight January's Children Facing a Parent's Cancer Month. We are so honored to be part of this awareness month with our friends at KESAM. This month was founded and coined by KESAM, and we are one of the collaborating organizations. And so we are always wanting to highlight the needs of children and teenagers when a parent has cancer. But January is a month where we want to do this even more, and we're working together with other organizations to do so. And we encourage all of you to take a look at that landing page because there's wonderful resources for families impacted by cancer that you can find there. Okay, so I just want to give a real brief overview of what we will be covering today. The focus is really stepping through all stages and phases of a cancer journey with ideas for helping your child understand and process cancer treatment, side effects, all of those things. And so we're going to start by just focusing on the benefits of honest and ongoing conversations because that weaves throughout. And then we're going to highlight different activities, tips, and tools, as well as books, divided out by newly diagnosed. So if you're in that newly diagnosed phase, or if you're dealing with ongoing treatment, also during relapse, and then if you're in the stage of no evidence of disease. So I'll turn it over to Katie.
All right, so when Kim and I were talking about having this presentation, we thought it was really, really important just to kind of give a brief overview of our standpoint regarding the benefits of honest and ongoing conversation, especially around a cancer diagnosis. And this question I included here, do I really need to tell them what is happening? I don't want to scare them. This is a very, very common question I have been asked throughout my entire career as a child life specialist. And I want to take a second just to acknowledge that the intention behind this question is always so good. But I usually talk to families in regards to, you know, your children pick up on a lot more than maybe we even realize and give them credit for at time. And so if we don't provide a space for them to process and ask questions, they can come up with some pretty wild stuff on their own. And that's usually been my experience, is working with families of how do you navigate that when, you know, they're kind of coming up with things on their own. And so I just want to acknowledge we really value the benefit of honest and ongoing conversation. And that's kind of the theme too throughout today's presentation. But protecting your child with this type of news can mean sharing information in an honest and very approachable and developmentally appropriate way. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go through every little detail of what's going on or maybe things you're not ready to share. But there is a huge benefit to having this conversation and keeping it going throughout your journey. So I did want to share this quote it's a quote from one of our providers. It says, it doesn't matter your background or experience. When you have to tell your child this kind of news, you want to do it in the right way. We didn't know how, so we called Wonders and Worries. And honestly, the truth behind this quote is there are so many right ways to have a discussion with your child. You know your child best. And I do want you to kind of keep that in mind throughout today's presentation. You can use that background knowledge of your individual family and what's going on to make this experience so unique to them. So if that is something too that you are definitely more interested in, please feel free to reach out to us after this presentation, or if you have questions throughout, please use the chat feature and Missy will kind of help navigate those for us, and we'll try and get to them. But definitely keep in mind that there are a lot of right ways to have this conversation. And our take on it today is to maybe make it more playful and hands-on, so that everyone kind of feels comfortable with that. If you are someone though, who is like Katie and Kim, I don't even know where to begin. How do I do this? These are just some basic steps that we have come up with in regards to explaining cancer diagnosis. The very first step that you will take, and this may be review for a lot of you, but the first thing is just to find out what your child already knows. So you can ask, what do you know about cancer? You may have children that are more comfortable or at an age where it's more appropriate to play out what they think cancer is or draw it out. Do they know anybody with cancer? That is a question that you will sometimes be surprised too. They may know someone at school or heard someone at soccer. There's lots of ways that our children can hear and find out about cancer. And so just simply asking them kind of what they already know will create a great base for you to start having these conversations. The second step is just going to be to explain cancer in child-friendly terms and in a developmentally appropriate way. And what we mean by that is usually this conversation for me starts with explaining the difference between what a healthy cell job, what their jobs are and what cancer cells are. And so usually, if I'm going to keep it really simple, I will talk about healthy cells in our body have jobs and the cancer cells in our bodies don't have jobs. And then kind of building off of that and talking about all the different jobs that our blood cells and different cells in our bodies have. But then also talking about the fact that your healthy cells in your body, they work as a team and they kind of have this natural lifespan. So they will kind of regenerate, so to speak, but those cancer cells don't really do that. They just kind of hang out. They don't have a job and they're hanging out and kind of getting in the way of everyone else doing their job. That's a very basic, explanation, but you're kind of getting the idea of the lingo that I will try and use. And highlighting the fact that your team is around to help, right? Like keep your body healthy. That's always another thing that I usually will talk about with families is your medical team is there to help keep it healthy and to help keep your body strong. The third step would be to clarify misconceptions, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail in regards to development specifically too about common misconceptions, but just things to be mindful of. Your child obviously didn't cause the cancer. That's a really common question we get asked a lot. You can't catch cancer. That is really common. And every cancer is very different and unique to the person. And so kind of highlighting that and making sure that, again, having that ongoing communication throughout your journey will be helpful too, so that they can know that they can ask questions and get clarifications as things come up. And then the fourth thing is creating that environment for open and ongoing communication. So letting your child know that you'll keep them in the loop, especially if they are very information seeking. Sometimes that looks like setting up regular updates, right? So say if you're someone that's going to an appointment once a week and you have a child that is really anxious about that appointment, you can talk to them about how after that appointment, we'll talk about updates as a family, or maybe you have older kids and they want, or teens, and they're good with you texting them about updates on your appointment, things like that. Again, your family best, so just keep that mindset as we go through today's presentation. And then here are some just tips and general advice for conversations about cancer. Honestly, we've talked quite a bit about a lot of points on here, so I can kind of let you read this if you would like. We'll also have a PDF that we'll send out after today's presentation, so don't be too worried about writing a bunch of notes, although I welcome that. I'm a note taker myself, but if you want to take a second and read through, these are great. But I do want to highlight two kind of key things on here that we haven't talked about just yet. The first one being saying you don't know to an answer is so, so powerful for your children to hear. And I often find when I'm working with families, that can feel really intimidating as a parent. I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to feel like we have to know everything about all the things all the time. I used to joke with my dad about if that was like a real answer, if that was a dad answer, because he used to just, he wanted to make sure he had an answer for whatever I had a question for. And so it's kind of been a running joke in our family about, is this a dad answer, or do we need to fact check and do we really not know? But I think what's great about saying you don't know is this process that you're going to show your children of problem solving. So just because you don't know something doesn't mean that you're forever not going to know it. For example, you can model that, wow, that's a really great question. I don't know the answer to that, but here's what I'm going to do about it. My next appointment, I'm going to write this question down in my notes app in my phone. We're going to ask that, and then I'm going to bring it back with an answer after my appointment. Something as simple as that, right? And it shows them that, oh, it's not a big deal that we don't know this, and that I can kind of go through problem solving with you of finding out the answer. It's super powerful. The other thing I wanted to highlight is oftentimes we hear from families that their children want to help. So if you are comfortable with allowing your child to help with either your aspects of your medical care if you're home, or it can be things around the house. I've had families that, if your children are old enough and they are at the age and interest of wanting to make dinner, for example, maybe they can help with that, and that'll help with your house duties as well. If they're not at the age of making dinner, maybe they want to pick dinner. Maybe you put some, limits on that, like it can't be pizza every week or something, whatever is unique to your family. But again, coming up with ideas to get them involved, that's only going to help them feel more purposeful in your family unit, and also like they have a sense of control and mastery of something going on.
Katie, I have a question that came through that I think you may want to take right now.
Yeah.
The question is, should parents wait to tell their children about the cancer diagnosis until there is a treatment plan in place versus telling them when there is an unknown regarding the next steps?
I think that will depend a lot, right, on your family and their style, and what you're comfortable with. I think that, the good thing about having these ongoing conversations, again, if you have children that you think would benefit from knowing some of the information and feel comfortable saying, I don't know what our treatment plan will look like yet, that can be very powerful. However, I've also worked with families where it's also valid, right, that as the parent, you kind of want to know a plan too before you just jump into something like this. So there's so many right answers to this. And Kim, you can add on or correct me on any of that, but that would probably be my take on that question.
I completely agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome question though. Thank you for putting that in the chat. So the other thing I wanted to highlight, this is a lot of review. I'm sure you are parents, you are living through these stages. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new, but I did want to just highlight having this in the back of your mind of your child's developmental level will help too with the conversations. It'll help with when we're going through these hands-on activities, what is appropriate for your child, what maybe your child may have more interest in. But we do have an app, it's called Wonders and Worries to Go for Parents. We're going to kind of highlight it at the end, but I did want to just make a little plug for it here too, because there's lots of wonderful resources in our app if you are curious about is this typical for, my child's developmental level? What are some resources and tools? I highly encourage you to check it out. But what I did want to just highlight really briefly here are a lot of misconceptions that we hear of and have at these different developmental levels, just so you are aware when you maybe go to sit down with your child, what they may be thinking or what is typical. So when we're working with toddlers and preschoolers, I think of when you talk to them, they are in a very magical thinking era, very egocentric, right? Like they are in their world and it is imaginary. And there is something really cool about that. The hard part when you have a diagnosis like cancer is making sure that they're also being realistic about what's going on, and kind of trying to bridge that gap. One example I love to use, I still think about this little boy all the time, but he actually had the illness himself. He was probably around 5 or 6. He was diagnosed with cancer, and when he came to me, he had just had a port placed. And his parents told me, they were trying to make this a more positive experience. He was very into superheroes and loved Iron Man. And so he kind of ran with it, I guess, on his own, of like the port being like Iron Man, which I could see, right? A port, when you show them, kind of looks like the little Iron Man button. The part we weren't anticipating was when we went to go access his port for the first time, he thought that the team were like the bad guys coming for Iron Man. And he had to protect him and his family. And so it took a lot of work with this family, in trying to honor that space of like wanting to make this right, not such a scary thing, but also acknowledging that him having this real information about what the port's job is, and it's actually to help, and that the people coming with him for the port access are helpers, kind of shifted his whole narrative. But before that, he was in his own comic book time during that port access. So something to be considerate of, something also very, very common and typical that I would expect at this age. When we go into the school age, cognitive development, children start to become super logical, almost sometimes to a point where I have definitely been reminded throughout my work with children in this age group how logical. This is really common when children will ask, well, can I catch cancer? We had one family I worked with recently, and the little boy assumed that he was going to catch cancer from the father, because they were over at their house 2 months ago, and everyone got a cold, so we have to be really careful, and just very innocent, and then having to explain that cancer isn't something that we catch and things like that. So those are types of questions you'll hear around this age. And then when you go into adolescence, the powerful part of adolescent development is their ability to think so abstractly about concepts. And that is really helpful when talking about plans, especially if you have teens that are really anxious and like to know all the plans. You can kind of go through everything. The part that's hard about this is knowing sometimes what your teen is thinking. One example I always love to give is I was working with this boy, he was about probably 16, 17, and his dad had a very rare cancer diagnosis. And he had looked up, I guess, online and found a random blog of someone's very unique personal experience with this cancer diagnosis. And he had all of these concerns and questions and worries that was all focused on this blog, and he was trying to solve it on his own. And it took probably a couple weeks of us being like, wow, these are such great questions. Like, where are you getting these from? And then me finally realizing, wait, he's reading this blog post. we need to make sure, like, he feels like we have a space to talk about, like, his dad's experience is going to be quite different than this person's, and that's okay. But helping him plan better for all of that. So these are just things to keep in mind, again, as we're going throughout today's presentation, and when thinking about what can happen and what can be typical when you're working with all of these different ages of your children. And then if you are still like, oh man, Katie, I am still so nervous, I feel like I don't know where to begin, please reach out to myself, Kim, our Wonders and Worries website. But this is also another wonderful resource that we have. This is a previous Wonder Chat that we have recorded, and it'll walk you through a a lot about just great tips on how to have these conversations. So this is another good place to start. Okay, so we did break up this presentation throughout, right, the cancer journey. And so if you are someone who is listening today and you have just gotten a diagnosis, or maybe you can even reflect back on you or your partner or someone in your family who's gotten this diagnosis, the very first question you may have is, how do I even begin to start this conversation? And I want to acknowledge that this can be a very overwhelming time. And I encourage you to take a moment to process that. Much like with many things in life, you do not have to have all this figured out, especially after your initial diagnosis appointment. A lot of families talk about that being something that feels very overwhelming when they're getting ready to talk to their children, is they have to have everything figured out. You do not. But when you are ready, what I do think is really helpful, and the way we've broken up this presentation, is having some hands-on activities to help promote that conversation, not just for your children because it's fun and engaging and appropriate for them, but also for you, because I don't know many adults that love to sit down and have some crucial conversations just face to face, right? If you have something to do too, it kind of makes this feel a lot more or less overwhelming, so to speak. And children, it is normal for them to need breaks, to need these hands-on things, to need play, to need everything. So also keep that in mind too, and you can individualize all of these too to what will meet your family's needs. So the first activity that I wanted to highlight is our wonderful Wonders and Worries jar. This is a great activity just to promote conversation and discussion about concerns and questions and things like that about your diagnosis. And it's a great place for them to have like a dedicated space to store all of those things. So the materials you're going to need for this are going to be some colored paper, or it could be Post-it notes, it can be printer paper, it could be kind of whatever you have around the house. We used a glass jar like pictured in this picture here, but you could use a bowl, a box. I've seen and heard of people using like different piggy bank type style things. And then anything you want to decorate the jar with, and then something to write on the paper to put in the jar. And the way you will start this activity is just by sharing that questions and worries are super normal to have, especially when something new or challenging happens, and you can kind of introduce the jar as a place where we're gonna, as a family, kind of like keep all of those things in a space, a dedicated space to process all of that. You can have them start by decorating the jar, and as they're decorating, ask them too, when they're writing down their first little questions and concerns on paper, what do they know about cancer? What have they heard? What have they read? And as you're kind of answering those questions, then you can also start to think of your own worries and questions. And again, modeling that for them is going to be really helpful for this activity. Some examples of this are, one thing that worries me is how this is affecting you. This can be really hard at times, and this is something new, and I want to be supportive and figure out what that means to you. Another question that you can ask is, some question I have had for the doctor are, and just list them out and showing again that you've had questions yourselves. And then encourage them to kind of share their worries, and they can write them down. If you have younger children, they can maybe draw them out, and then you can ask them a little bit more about their drawing. And the cool thing about this is that those questions and worries can either stay in the jar if they would like to have a space for them, or if you would like to kind of go back to them later in like later discussions, or they can be taken out so that as new questions and worries and things like that pop up, you can put more in there. But again, this is unique to you and what your family will benefit from. So if this is something that you think would be really helpful to pull out once a month and go through the jar as a family, you can make a space to do that. Or it can be something that you are starting off this conversation and it served its purpose. So again, individualize it to your needs. The other activity I wanted to highlight in this initial diagnosis section is called Blood Soup. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, Katie, why is it called blood soup? That sounds weird. A lot of families I work with, a lot of children I work with, always talk, it's a conversation starter for sure to talk about blood soup. I cannot take credit for this. I actually don't even know who to credit to the initial blood soup to. This is a really common way that we do diagnosis education throughout the country, as far as I know, in the child life world. But this is really great because we're going to be able to take a very abstract concept such as blood in your body and make it very concrete. So for this activity, you're going to need a jar. This could be a cup, a plastic bag. You're going to need the different components that make up your blood. So for today, for this purpose, you know, I have corn syrup pictured here as your plasma. The red hot candies are going to be your red blood cells. The white rice can be your platelets, and then the mini marshmallows are your white blood cells. And it is optional if you get to a point and you have children with the attention span and interest to keep going, to add in cancer cells at the very end. And that I always use NERDs, but it can be a bunch of different things. NERDs are kind of cool if you're using these things described here, just because they are tiny and they get in the way of a lot, and you can kind of see that. But I've had people use beads, different food items. This is really kind of what you have at home. It's just trying to get the point across of like showing them that you have different things in your body and their jobs. So the way I'll start this is usually, again, asking what they know already, and then we'll try to build our soup. And so I always typically I'll start with the plasma. I'll put that in and talk about how, you know, this is the way that our blood cells move throughout our body. And then we get to pour in different blood cells as we go. So the platelets are the Band-Aid cells. If you, you know, get a scrape, their job is to help keep the blood inside your body and protect it from the outside. Red blood cells, your red hot candies, when they start to add those in, carry all the air throughout your body, which is super important. You need air to do everything. And then the white blood cells are your fighter cells. Those are the cells that are going to help fight off germs and keep your body healthy. Again, that child-friendly lingo. And this is a great place too. Oh, sorry. Ooh. This is a great place too, where you can start to talk about symptoms that you're having, right? So if you're someone that's needing to go get infusions, or say you have bruising going on, your children can kind of make that connection of, oh, you're going to go get some more platelets or more red blood cells because, you know, your body needs help and the team of that team needs help. I did include a video on here, and this is a video I used to use all the time, especially when I have children that are older, because sometimes, you know, if I try to explain this to a teenager, they're going to look at me like, you want me to do what? So this is a video by the American Society of Hematology. It doesn't really go into the cancer part, but it does show a really great description of each blood cell and its job. It's kind of more of like a Discovery Channel type of style video. But this is wonderful. I'm not going to play it for the sake of time today. But again, this will be a resource for you after today's presentation. So again, great activity to kind of, again, make this abstract concept into a concrete one. And next, we're going to talk about some books.
Okay, hello everyone. I took my background off because I'm going to show you some books and I want to make sure you can see them. As Katie was talking about, we really want to give you hands-on ways that you can interact with your children around helping them understand cancer and cancer treatment. And books can be a wonderful addition to the activities that Katie's describing or just to the conversations that you're having. So in each of these sections, we're going to highlight 2 or 3 of our go-tos. In no way are these books all inclusive. There are many, many wonderful books, and we do have a recommended book list on our website that we encourage you to look at. But I'm just going to touch on some ways that we use some of our go-to books. So this book, Butterfly Kisses and Wishes on Wings, it's ideal for children, I would say as young as 4 up through maybe about age 10. And we often use it for this teaching page. As Katie was talking about the different ways we might describe the differences between cancer cells and healthy cells, a visual, and this is a nice visual for a younger child, can be really helpful. Another reason that we really like this book is it's a beautiful conversation between a young child and his mother, where he's asking questions. And this can go really nicely with the Wonders and Worries jar, because he says, I wasn't sure what cancer was. So I asked my mom, what is cancer? She said, it isn't like a cold or a cough or even the flu. She said, it's hard to explain. I asked her to try anyway. So it just goes through questions that he has, the way his mom explains it, and it can really be used as an added piece. And as we go through these books, we really encourage you to use them in the way that works best for you. You can skip pages, you can change words, definitely pause and have back and forth interactions with your children. So this one, What Happens When Someone I Love Has Cancer, is really beneficial also for the cancer teaching piece. It focuses on healthy cells and cancer cells and uses Legos as an analogy, which is a common analogy that we like. Just the Legos are the building blocks or the healthy cells in the body. And then it goes through the different types of healthy cells that we have, and just how Katie was talking about what happens when, in this book, they talk about the cells becoming broken. So again, you can use language that fits for you. And then it goes through the various aspects of cancer treatment. What I really like about this book as well is it follows this character, Mia, and her little stuffed animal, Stuart, is a character throughout. And that can really help children relate. And that's another reason books are really helpful, is that they see another child dealing with a similar situation. And you can talk about as a family that you're not the only family going through this. And the book represents that. And then and I didn't mention, I would say this book for ages maybe 6 to about, I don't know, 11 or 12, but you can use it for older children as well. And then this is a great book for teens, tweens and teens. I would say about 11 all the way through the teen years. And its teaching pages are actually, they have little paper clips on them, but I've paper clipped them here. It goes into when cells go wild, which is a little more comprehensive explanation of cancer cells. It also has a page about surgery. It has a page about drainage tubes and a picture of a tube, a drawing of a JP drain, chemotherapy, and then radiation. And then the book itself is a journal where a girl is journaling about her experience with her mom's cancer treatment throughout that time. Your child may or may not be interested in the journal, or you may just want to read a few excerpts from it with them and just kind of check in. Is that true for you? Is it different for you? And go about it that way. I'll turn it back to Katie.
Thanks, Kim. So now we're going to go into the ongoing treatment part of this presentation. And this is actually a question that I've had from one of my friend's daughters. She said, well, why is your hair falling out if the medicine is supposed to help your body fight cancer? And this is a very common question, especially when you think of most children's experiences with things like medicine. They are seeing it do its job, but like not really any outward expression of any secondary type of symptom, like maybe you will experience if you're someone who's going through chemo. If they have a fever, they're going to take Tylenol and the fever will be gone, right? And that's it. So again, trying to help explain these abstract concepts into a very concrete way so that they understand, and understand too that it is helping. The help just kind of looks a little different. So one activity we wanted to focus on is called, well, we're going to call it the DOT method. So the DOT method is a book that Kelsey Mora, who is a child life specialist, she's also a Wonders and Worries provider. She created this activity book to kind of help navigate this conversation about how to explain cancer. And it's a wonderful resource. If you are interested in getting it, we have linked her webpage here too. She has a lot of resources on there. Our team's take on the DOT method doesn't always necessarily include her book. What I've shown here in the picture at the bottom is actually one of our providers doing their version of the DOT method. And that's kind of what I'm going to go over today. So the materials you'll need for this are going to be, we use bingo dot markers. It could be anything. It could be markers. I've had other people tell me they like stickers, like the bingo stickers, paper, pen, and then scissors if your treatment involves any sort of like surgery. And what will happen is you'll start to sense a theme. We like to kind of reiterate, right, the different jobs of the cells in your body. So you can usually take the charge of just kind of seeing what they remember maybe from your previous conversations about the different cells and their jobs in your body. So classifying each blood cell with a different color. On here, she did red for red blood cells, yellow for white blood cells, and orange for platelets. And then she had the child pick which color they wanted the cancer cells to be, and this child chose green. And then she said, okay, we have 15 seconds, and I want you to place as many cancer cells as you can on this paper. And so they were able to kind of make a game out of it, right, which was fun and interactive. And so they were able to place all these cancer cells. And then next, based on their treatment plan, she said, okay, well, let's do another 15 seconds. And we're going to have, sometimes they'll have them blindfold themselves to just put another component of this that makes this fun. I highly suspect this child didn't have a blindfold on because there's so many correct green crossed out, but either way is fine. But in 15 seconds, you're going to try and cross out as many cancer cells as you can. And what this will do too is naturally, even if you don't have a blindfold on, your brain's going to trick you a little bit, right, into crossing out some other cells. And we can talk about how chemo sometimes, right, does affect these other cells, but it's okay. There's lots of these other cells there too to help them do their job. And it kind of prompted a discussion about that. If you're someone that has like cancer in a concentrated area and will have surgery, we've also had specialists tell us that, you know, if they have like a body outline, kind of similar to what you're seeing in the title page of this DOT method book, you can kind of concentrate the cancer in that area. And if you're still doing the chemo, do the same thing, and then take the scissors, and it'll prompt a discussion about like having surgery and what that looks like. And, you know, prompt that whole discussion about that part of your treatment plan. So this is a wonderful activity to build on. The other activity I wanted to highlight, I'm calling this the play foam breast cancer activity. I like the idea of play foam, especially if you have children that are really into like sensory type things. We've had providers use Play-Doh. One specialist I was talking to a couple weeks ago, she uses pony beads. Again, this is kind of up to you and like what you have around. But the things you'll need for this is going to be play foam, paper, preferably maybe one that you can outline the body on, and then one you can cut out with a heart, and then pen and scissors. And what you're going to do is just create a body outline first. And this whole activity is to help understand breast cancer and like a tumor removal and or a mastectomy. And so what you'll do first is cut out this heart, and on the heart, you're going to talk about things that remain true to that person. So personality traits, right? So if you're working with your child and they say, oh, my mom's very kind and loving, they can write those things on there. And then what I have heard specialists start with is, again, talking about the different jobs of all the cells by identifying different colors. And you're going to stick the different colors of play foam throughout the whole body. And then you can start to make the breasts out of one color of play foam and place those on the chest. And when we talk about breast cancer, oftentimes you'll hear child life specialists talk about how some of the cells in that breast get sick and they start to change color, and that'll kind of help them represent, okay, that part's changing. And if you're someone that is getting, like, for example, a tumor removed, it can kind of stay in that one spot, or you can show it kind of go throughout. And depending on your treatment plan, talk about how they're going to remove that. Sometimes if that's a mastectomy, then you can show them actually removing both of the breasts as well, or one breast. And what's great about this is, right, we're going to take away the cancer and all of that, but what's going to remain the same are the heart with what make up the personality traits of that person, but also that they have all these other cells in their body, so that, again, are doing that job and trying to keep them healthy. There are lots of wonderful resources for this particular. I know Child Life to Go is another provider that recently, I think, posted a video about this, but we've had lots of people tell us they use lots of different things for this. So you can be as creative as you want, but again, helping create this more abstract concept in a concrete way. The final activity I wanted to talk about in this section is one of my all-time favorites. We call this the chemo experiment. Again, I can't really give credit to anyone who created this because I know this is floating around in the world of child life. But I use this a lot when we have children who are confused about why, how the chemo works and why it would impact you having your hair fall out. So what you'll need for this is going to be a cup, a jar, anything clear. And then you're going to have Tums, Alka-Seltzer, some Skittles, and then water. And if you feel comfortable, I love incorporating medical play in this as well. So I've worked with children, if mom has a port and like your team has, if you ask sometimes, especially if you explain why you want to use it for this, they can give you extra ports maybe that they have like from old teaching kits. That's kind of fun to be able to show your child with a real line. It could be an IV, a syringe, make it fun. But what you'll do is take the cup and again, just identify the different things you're placing in. So the Tums are going to be some of our healthy blood cells, like our red blood cells. Do you remember what their job is? The cancer cell is going to be the Alka-Seltzer. And we're going to pretend that the Skittles are our hair cells. And this is always fun too, to ask and then be prepared for whatever they ask of you after this question. But sometimes I will make it fun and be like, well, what color hair would you have if, it could be a Skittle color, or what hair do you color do you think it would be cool for mom to have? Sometimes that means they will ask you if you are someone that still is in this initial stage and has hair, they may see if you are curious about dyeing your hair purple. So just throwing that out there. But what is cool is when they start to add the chemo, which will be the water, what you'll see happen is the Alka-Seltzer is going to start to dissolve, like the picture I have here. The Tums, which represented some of those other healthy cells, you can see it's like kind of impacted, but it's still pretty much intact. And then the Skittle, the part that we were pretending is our hair cell, the coloring is going to come off, but that Skittle is still intact. And so highlighting the fact that, when we're having chemo, that's why I lose my hair, is because it's impacting that cell. But when we stop the chemo, some of the Skittle color will come back, or maybe it'll be a different color. Oftentimes have children that are surprised, right, that the hair is curlier or straighter or a different shade of red. So it also prompts that conversation of like, we're not sure what my hair may look like. And that's kind of cool. We get to find out together. But just acknowledging that it will grow back. This is just a part of your treatment. And so the next thing will be more book recommendations with Kim.
Yes. So some books that we really like to use for ongoing treatment is one that we have created. It's part of our I Wonder book series called I Wonder What It's Like When a Parent Has Cancer, Max's story. And just to know that we have been looking at the literature and trying to fill gaps. And we noticed that there's a gap in books for children representing a dad with cancer. So we wanted to be sure that we had that representation out there. So this book has a dad with cancer, but it can be used to focus on any person's cancer. With some of the things we like, so of course we have information about the healthy cells and the cancer cells, but then we highlight different helpers. We have a page on the child life specialist and how the child life specialist can help a child and can help a family. We talk about the nurse and the social worker, but then we talk about the different aspects of treatment. So this is a page about dad's surgery, and then there's a page about dad's chemotherapy. And this really can help kind of add to that conversation with the activities that Katie was just describing, focusing on, the body and all of those different pieces that she was talking about with the blood cells and the symptoms that come from chemotherapy. A page about radiation, and then it just goes on through the cancer journey. But the second half is really about the helpers and who is in their life that can support them, and then their healthy coping tools. So it's a great book to use throughout treatment. And then one that we have used for 23 years since we were founded is a book called The Hope Tree. And what's so nice about this book is each page is a different story. So each page has a theme, kind of a common theme that that comes up for children, and each page has the child's name and age. So it can really be a way to identify, like, oh, Anthony, when Anthony was 8 years old, he wrote this story about the day his family found out about their cancer diagnosis, or the day he found out. We often use this page to talk about this analogy of weeds. And weeds can be a great analogy for cancer cells, because sometimes you can't see weeds. They're under the soil. Some weeds are more difficult to get rid of than others. Some are kind of clumped in one area, others are spread around. But you can still have a healthy flower garden, a healthy vegetable garden, a healthy yard, even with some weeds. And then the last page of the Hope Tree, there's lots of different pages, but it's called the Hope Tree. And this is a wonderful page to focus on those hopes. We talk about hopes and wishes that haven't come true, but how we can replace with a new hope or wish, and things that won't change no matter what happens. So this book, I would say, is great for children as young as 4 up through about 10 or 11. This one, I would say about age 6 to maybe those tween years. And then a book for teens, I would say 13 and older, is this book, My Parent Has Cancer and It Really Sucks. It is filled with stories and quotes from teenagers in their own words, and is highly relatable from one teenager to another. And so it covers the whole spectrum of cancer, including death due to cancer. So be aware of that, but that's a topic that will come up with teens, and that we encourage you to address openly, and that will continue to build that trust. I also recommend that parents order these books and look at them yourself first. And sometimes your child may not be interested in the book, but you can use the book as just other ways that you might approach the topic with them. All right, I'll turn it back to Katie.
All right, so now we're going into the presentation part about if you are listening in and going through a relapse. This can be a really hard time for children to process, as they really start to feel a sense of like loss of control again. So we have a few activities I wanted to highlight. The first one, I don't want to go into a ton of detail, just because this is basically how the blood soup activity that I talked a lot about in the beginning, you would modify that if you are someone who is going through immunotherapy. And so you'll need essentially the same items that you needed for blood soup. The biggest difference is you'll make 2 versions of the blood soup, one of which is going to have your original white blood cells, so to speak, so those mini marshmallows. And then what we do is we re-engineer those into the bigger, whatever that looks like for what you've picked, but the bigger cells in the body. So for this, we use regular sized marshmallows. And the biggest difference with having this conversation is just going to be talking about how in this treatment plan, what happens is your team who's helping is going to take out some of your cells. And I've had specialists describe this as, you know, they're going to re-engineer the cells. I like to sometimes use they're getting special training. And then when they've gone through that, they get placed back into the body, and their training or re-engineered time has made it so that they can find and basically get rid of those cancer cells to help guard your body. So again, a little bit of a simplified way to describe a very complicated treatment, but this usually helps with understanding kind of like the behind the scenes of what's going on with immunotherapy. I did include this video. Again, I probably am not going to play it for the sake of time today, but it is a resource for you. This is another video. It's very widely used by multiple child life specialists throughout the country. It's wonderful animation, just kind of explaining how immunotherapy works. The second activity I wanted to highlight in this section in particular, especially if you have children who love sensory type of games and activities, or if you're someone too that has like a solid tumor removal coming up or on the horizon, this is really fun. So the materials you'll need for this are going to be some body part molds. We found some of these pictured here just like on Amazon. You could probably also find some of these at a craft store, especially after we just passed Halloween. So I'm thinking maybe they would even be on sale right now. And then Jello mix, we use sprinkles and fruit in like what we've talked about as providers of what we use most. But again, this can be anything, beads, something that's going to represent like that solid tumor or the cancer throughout the organ. And then surgery tools. We have Play-Doh tools pictured here, but this can kind of be anything that you have at home, kitchen tools, things like that. And what will happen is once you make that mold with the Jello, making sure, you know, if you have, for example, like the solid tumor, that you're putting it in there when it's still needing to set a little bit, and then having them play out surgery. And this is great too. When we do medical play around surgery, naturally questions come up, right? That you can answer, that sometimes you may be surprised what type of questions you get asked, but it'll be a great way to talk about how the team's job is just to take out this part, and that you are safe under anesthesia, and talking about the anesthesia and that whole role, but a good conversation starter and hands-on activity. The other activity I wanted to highlight is this experiential game. So sometimes during a relapse, what we hear is that people have different or more intense symptoms compared to like your previous course of treatment. And your children may need help like understanding that. They kind of feel like, wait, I've mastered you going through this, you know, and this is what it was like. Why is this different? So sometimes we need to show them a little bit about what is happening. These are just some examples that we've kind of worked through. But if you're someone who's experiencing any sort of weakness or fatigue, especially like in your hands, you can have your children put on oven mitts and try and like write out something or draw. That usually helps with the connection of that. If you're experiencing neuropathy, this is really, really popular, putting macaroni, like dried, not cooked macaroni, in socks. Most of our providers joke that they don't even need to have the child like stand up. It's usually enough of a sensory to just put it on and be like, nope, I don't like this. But that'll kind of help explain like, you know, what that feeling can feel like for them. If you're experiencing memory issues, doing a really fast memory game like pictured here, or even a game of telephone. So, right, if you start to play a game of telephone, your brain's not receiving all the info at the end of a long telephone game, and that's kind of what it feels like. And then vision problems or dizziness. If you have a pair of glasses, again, it was just Halloween, maybe it was part of a costume and some Vaseline, it could be oil, something that's going to kind of blur up those lenses. That'll help them understand too a little bit about maybe why we don't want to walk around if we're feeling dizzy, because that, you know, doesn't make me feel good, things like that. So this is fun too, because it's more of a game and less like a art activity type of thing. And then the final activity I wanted to highlight, this is fairly new to me and our team at Wonders and Worries, but is such a wonderful resource. So the Adventure Jar, this is a book. I put the link on here because this website is amazing. They have a free ebook available for download. They have a bunch of free resources on there. But this is a children's book about a mom living with metastatic breast cancer, and probably more appropriate for like preschool, school age children, but it talks about creating a jar with fun adventures and like a wish list of things they want to do when mom's having a good day. And so the materials you'll need are very similar to like our Wonders and Worries jar, but rather than filling the jar with your questions and worries and concerns, this jar's purpose is to have your family all kind of pick things that they would like to do. And then it's kind of up to you how you would like to implement it. But in this book, they have the family, they'll randomly pick out on mom's good day, like, you know, what they want to do. And they take turns. And the thing I love about this is, like I said, they have great resources. So if you're like, Katie, this is way too many arts and crafts for me, I don't want to do all this. On their website, they have pre-done like labels and prompts and things like that you can print out. But the other thing I wanted to highlight that I loved when I was reading through this book is there's this theme throughout saying, make it a habit to look for magic. And I think that is so powerful for really any family. But the cool thing is right on in the book, they're going to some things that families may consider ordinary, but they're finding the extraordinary things in there so that they have this really positive memory as a family. So awesome resource. Definitely check it out. Then I'll pass it over to Kim.
All right. So books for this stage, if you're dealing with relapse or with metastatic cancer that was maybe diagnosed as metastatic, these can all work in that way. This book, The Cancer That Wouldn't Go Away, it's ideal, I would say, for ages about 5 or 6 to up through tweens and teens. It talks about that difference that Katie mentioned that children may experience if they've been through the cancer journey before, if your family's been through the cancer journey before. Because on this page, the little boy, there's another Max in this story. Max thought mom looked fine. Her hair was nice and long, not like last time when it all fell out. Mom had looked kind of funny without hair, but Max had gotten used to it. So just those differences of what they might have understood cancer was all about with what it looks like now. And if you were diagnosed with a metastatic cancer from the beginning and they don't have that reference point, that's okay too, because they're certainly referencing other cancer experiences that they come in contact with and trying to understand the differences. The theme throughout this book is really take it one day at a time and how it'll be an up and down journey. So this talks about sometimes mom looked great. She had energy and she sang along with the radio as she made dinner. Other days mom was tired and she said that everything hurt her. But then also about how children can adapt and cope. And so then Max began to get used to cancer again. Sometimes mom felt good. Sometimes mom felt bad. Some days she played, some days she rested. So this can really generate some great conversations about what your child is focusing on, the changes that are impacting them the most. This book, The Rainbow Feelings of Cancer, can be used with all ages, as young as preschoolers through teenagers, and it really can be used at any time in a cancer journey. It was written by a girl and her mom when her mom was going through cancer treatment, and this little girl, Chia, or Carrie, it's Carrie and Chia. Carrie's the daughter, Chia's the mom. She did all the illustrations. So the illustrations are very child friendly and the words are very simple, but very profound. So children, they interpret it at different levels depending on their developmental level. So that tree picture says, "This is my best tree painting ever. One thing my mom tells me is that I'm my own person. She reminds me that my life is very full and that her cancer is just one part of it. That helps me feel strong and sturdy." So really some great double messages. And then I'll show this picture. This is a picture of the doctor. It always makes me smile. My mom goes to lots of doctors. One part of me likes them because I want them to help my mom get better. Another part feels like they get to see my mom more than me. And then just this picture that we can all relate to, just feeling happy and sad at the same time. So that's The Rainbow Feelings of Cancer. And then the last one I'll mention is Nana, What's Cancer? This is a great book for tweens and teens. I would say age 11 and older. Even though it looks maybe more like a children's book, the text is much heavier. And it's a question and answer between a granddaughter and her grandmother. And the grandmother has metastatic cancer. And so it's another book that even if you never read it with your child, it might be beneficial to just read the questions, things like, why are some cancers worse than others? What causes cancer? And the explanation gets into the interactions between genetics, environment, and behavior for those older children. And it also talks about an analogy of trying to manage cancer, kind of like if we had a tiger at the zoo who got out of their enclosure, that could be scary. But if we could get the tiger back kind of in the enclosure, if we can manage the cancer, that it doesn't have to be scary. All right, Katie. Sorry, this one's me too. I just wanted to mention for those of you who are dealing with metastatic cancer, we have another Wonder Chat that might be really helpful to you. It focuses specifically on incurable illness, cancer and other incurable illnesses that are in that chronic stage of not expecting to be cured, but it's not an end of life situation either. So the information is there to watch that Wonder Chat. Okay.
All right, and we are in our final section now, so no more treatment. I love children. This is a great example of how literal they can be. So who is Ned? Ned standing for no evidence of disease. What does this look like? So you may be surprised to find out that your children and teens have a lot of feelings and concerns regarding the unknown during this time. You know, you're still going to be having checkups and blood work. And again, it's really important to keep them up to date and involved in these plans as much as they want to be. So we picked out a couple activities for this section, one of which I love is we call it the Let It Go balloon activity. And so, you know, oftentimes what happens is worries and anxieties can kind of bog your mind down. And when we learn to let things go, that can be super challenging to do, but kind of having a hands-on way for them to identify that worry and stressor, for you to have a conversation about how you would navigate that and kind of let it go is super powerful. So for the materials for this, you will need some balloons, Sharpies. You can use scissors, a sharp tool. We'll kind of get creative with how you want to let the worries go. But the very first thing you're going to do is if you have children that maybe need to get some energy out, you can totally have them blow up the balloon. If you want to release them outside, you can have balloons filled with helium, usually at like a craft store somewhere near you or the grocery store. And you're going to write down worries that you have on the balloon. And oftentimes we hear from families that at this stage, a common concern is that the cancer is going to come back. And so then what we'll do is we'll have them either, like I said, go outside and release the balloon. If they blew it up in the house and you are okay with this, you can have them release it inside the house, and it kind of is fun and goes all over the room. Just be mindful of anything that may break in your space. You can pop it with scissors. They can sit on it. There's lots of ways, right, that we can let it go. And they may want to share a little bit about the concern and what's going on as they do that. And that's a great prompt for you to kind of have a conversation of, is this something that we can navigate together? Again, modeling that problem solving process. So this will be a time, for example, if the concern was about the cancer coming back, you can say, well, when we have regular conversations and checkups, you know, I'm going to update you, and this is my plan for that, so that they kind of know that that's the plan. Some modifications to this, if you are someone that like is not about balloons, you don't love this type of way to let it go, we've had people write out concerns on paper and rip it up. Toilet paper is really common, especially, I will just put this out there, a lot of providers say a lot of the younger boys think that's fun to write out their worries on the toilet paper. You could flush it. Now with it being kind of like more fall and autumn time, you'll find some leaves around. You can even write some of that on the leaves. And then as you go for like a family walk, you can do this activity and kind of crumple it up and let it go, you know, on the trail, something like that. So lots of different ways to let it go, as Elsa would say, right? And then the final activity I wanted to cover for this section is a memory jar activity. This is a wonderful legacy activity. It also is something that I find families talk about being really beautiful to display. This is often something that you may want to put up in your kitchen or family room or their room. And it's pretty easy to do. The things you're going to need for this are going to be some paper plates or just some plain pieces of paper, some chalk, pens. I put a glass jar on here, like pictured here, but again, anything clear that you would be okay displaying, and then some salt, and the salt should be pretty like big and coarse. It'll just appear, it'll show up better if you use more coarse salt. And then what you're going to do is just fill up the whole jar you have as much as you want height wise with the salt. And then on the different pieces of paper, you can write out different memories or things that you want to remember, that person wants to remember about the family at that time. It could be, you know, well, this year our family color for this event was blue. Pink is for the sunsets that we experienced as a family together, something like that. And you're going to write down those things on the piece of paper. and kind of just create a little mark with the chalk, like by making like a little circle. And then you're going to rub the salt and those different colors of chalk together. And what you're going to find, and this is kind of cool, another like experiment type of thing, is the salt's going to take on that color. And once you have all the memories laid out, you can pour it in where you can create like layers, like pictured here. Some children like to mix up all of the colors, and that's fine too. It can be mixed together. It can kind of be up to you. And then if your jar that you've chosen is large enough, something I would like to do is on the bottom with like maybe like a Sharpie or a label or something, is kind of categorize and write the year and kind of what the colors were represented in the year. Just it's fun to look at as kids get older. But this is great to use either as memories you want to remember, or it can be another conversation starter too for things you're looking forward to that are like maybe planned out on the horizon. But another wonderful resource.
Okay, so a few books that can be used anytime, but can be really helpful during this time of hopefully stability and no evidence of disease. One is called The Bear Is Not There, and it is really beneficial, I would say, for ages like 6 and older, all the way up through adulthood, because it talks about and really simplifies this concept of how our brains protect us. And they, as you go through something like cancer treatment, your brain can become, can start to be on hyper alert that something's wrong, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And then it can stay in that place, even at a time where things are more stable, but it's hard for your brain to trust that. So this goes through in real child-friendly ways, just describing how our brain helps us decide when something is fun and when something is dangerous. But sometimes our brains overcompensate and they think something is dangerous when it's not. So this talks about Mia, the same little Mia it's the same author, Sarah Olsher, from this book. She has wonderful resources. I highly recommend all of the things that she's written. But it's the same Mia, and Mia's brain is telling her that there's a bear, but the bear is a stuffed bear. So it kind of makes it fun to talk about, and it talks about neurons and just the ways that our brains respond. And then you can tie this into, we have lots of families talk about when it's time for scans, if you're in that mode of needing scans every so many months, that everybody's nerves are on edge and everybody's kind of anxious and maybe a little more irritable. Well, what's happening with the brain? The brain is on higher alert at that time. And then the other one is The Rhino Who Swallowed a Storm. And this I love for all ages. And if you have teenagers and you're like, I really want to read this book to my teenager, but I don't think they're going to go for it, just say, you know what, books can be a really helpful way for even adults to take a more complex topic and put it on more simpler terms. So let's just kind of think about this together. But what this really hones in on is that natural instinct to protect our loved ones. And this rhino, there's a storm that's going on in his world, and he swallows that storm to protect all of those around him. And then he's carrying that storm inside. And of course, that's not good for him. And so it kind of goes through what's happening for him. He ends up in a deep hole. His friends help him out, but then he finds ways to release that storm through tears, through breathing, and then comes out kind of on the other side with his friends, kind of recognizing how it can be detrimental to hold everything in. So those are the last of our book recommendations, except for, if you go to the next slide, Katie, a couple recommendations for all of you as parents. Again, we have a comprehensive book list on our website, but these are a couple books that we really like if you are a reader and want to read a few things. My go-to is always the How to Help Children Through a Parent's Serious Illness by Kathleen McHugh. That's one that we have all read and have recommended many, many times to parents. But all of the books on this list are really beneficial. And the last one I want to mention, What Do I Tell the Kids by Cancer Support Community? That's a free download. And so you can have that ebook in your hands today if that's something that you're interested in. So our helpline we've mentioned throughout. If you're watching this recording and you have any questions about this topic, or you want us to send you the slides, you can email our helpline and just reference this Wonder Chat and let us know what you need. But all of you can call or email our helpline for individual guidance with any of the things we've talked about, with just supporting your children and your family at any stage or phase of your illness journey. And we have our wonderful, amazing professional staff ready to respond. And we respond Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Time. And then our app, which Katie mentioned, here are the QR codes to download that parent app. You can pause the video here to get that app. It is filled with more activities, developmental information, all sorts of communication strategies. So I recommend that you grab that app. And then thanks for bearing with us. We get so excited about all these activities. It's really hard to fit it within an hour. So we're really glad you're still with us. And here is a QR code to give us feedback. We really, really value your feedback and want to think about where to go from here with future Wonder Chats for parents. So please scan that QR code or put in that link to give us your feedback. And then let's pause here for Q&A if there are any questions that have come in.
So Kim and Katie, I feel like I asked the one question that came in the middle, and we don't have any further, but I do want to tell you how very grateful I am, and we all are, for you providing your knowledge and your insights and your expertise today. So thank you so much for sharing that with everyone.
Thank you. And Katie, go ahead. Yeah, the next slide, just in case you need, we welcome you to reach out directly to either of us. And then there's our Wonders and Worries website. So thank you all so much for being here, and
Oh,
have
Kim,
fun.
I'm so sorry. I think one just came in under the wire. So I want to make sure we ask any
Perfect.
book recommendations for toddlers.
Oh, yes. So there are a few books on our website. My go-to, and I don't have it right here with me, but is When Sammy's Mommy Had Cancer. I have used that book with certainly 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. I would say about 3 or 4, but a 2-year-old can listen in. They can see Sammy. They can see that Sammy has a mommy who's going through treatment. And then Kathleen McHugh, who wrote the parent book that we reference, she has a book that's Someone I Love Has Cancer. I think I'm getting the title right, but what's wonderful about it, it's like a binder, and you can pick and choose the pages that apply to your treatment, and it is very appropriate for very young children, toddlers and preschoolers. You could just have a few pages, and really with toddlers and preschoolers, it's more about that visual connection, and then just connecting it to your family story and helping them start to become more familiar with the topic. I think I see something in the chat.
It's a follow-up, and it says he's only 3, so anything with illustrations that are simple.
Yeah, I would say Sammy's Mommy Has Cancer or the Kathleen McHugh book. Both of those would work well for your 3-year-old. Great. We're so glad you were with us today. And I think that's everything. Please reach out with any other questions or needs, and thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for joining us.